Love begins as a whisper, a gentle promise between two hearts that beat as one. But for Armaan and Ayesha it was not just a whisper. It was a symphony woven with struggle, hardship, and the deepest sacrifices that life could demand. For when they married, their world was small, a tiny apartment with cracked walls, a leaky ceiling, and dreams that seemed far bigger than the life they lived, yet they held on to each other, believing that no matter how poor they were, as long as they were together, they were rich. And in those first years Ayesha would sit by the dim light of a lantern stitching clothes until her fingers grew sore, while Armaan worked long hours as a clerk during the day and rode his motorbike at night delivering parcels. His back aching, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Yet each evening when he returned home, the sight of Ayesha waiting by the window, smiling despite her tired face, gave him strength to continue, for she carried hope in her eyes, hope that one day they would leave behind the cracked walls and live in a home where laughter echoed louder than hunger. And when the world asked them how they survived with so little, they would answer with one word: love. But love is tested most fiercely in the crucible of sacrifice, and that test came when Armaan was offered a once-in-a-lifetime scholarship to study abroad, a chance that could transform their lives forever. And as he held the letter in trembling hands, his heart pounded with both joy and fear, for it meant leaving Ayesha alone for 3 long years, 3 years of nights without her presence, 3 years of absence when her laughter would only live in memory. And he said to her with tears in his eyes, "I cannot go, not when it means abandoning you." But she, with the courage only a devoted wife could possess, placed the letter back in his hands and whispered, "You will not abandon me, Armaan. You will fight for us, and I will wait for you no matter how long it takes." And so she sacrificed her own comfort, her own need for companionship, allowing him to chase his dreams while she remained behind, enduring loneliness as her constant companion. In those years apart, Ayesha became both guardian and warrior, paying bills with the money she earned from stitching, cutting her own expenses so that she could secretly send him a little extra, ensuring that he never went hungry in a foreign land. And she told no one of the nights she cried herself to sleep in an empty bed, hugging his shirt just to feel close to him, for she knew that her pain was the price of his future. And Armaan too made sacrifices in his own way, surviving on the barest of meals, studying late into the night until his eyes burned, refusing to waste a single moment, because he knew his wife was waiting with hope, waiting with patience, and he wanted to return not as the poor man who had left her but as the man worthy of her sacrifices. When finally, after 3 years, the day came for him to return, their reunion at the airport was filled with tears of joy, arms holding tightly as if never to let go again. But beneath Ayesha's smile there lingered a shadow, a weakness in her body she tried to hide, for while he had been away chasing success, she had been battling an illness in silence, an illness she had discovered months earlier when she began coughing blood, an illness she dared not tell him about for fear that he would give up everything to return. And so she bore it alone, selling her gold bangles to pay for medicines, hiding her pain behind laughter during phone calls, always telling him she was fine, because her love demanded she protect his dreams even if it meant sacrificing her health. Armaan did not notice at first, blinded by his excitement to finally be with her again. But one night as he searched through a drawer he found the bottles of medicine she had hidden, and in that moment the weight of her sacrifice crashed upon him, his heart shattering as he confronted her, demanding why she had kept this secret. And through her tears she confessed, "I could not be the reason you gave up your future, Armaan. I could not let my illness steal from you what you worked so hard for." And he held her face in his hands, sobbing, "You are my future, Ayesha. None of it matters without you." And with that realization he made his own sacrifice, turning down job offers and opportunities, rejecting every chance that required him to leave her side, and instead devoting himself to her care, selling what little they had, even pawning his precious degree, so he could afford her treatments. For months he stayed by her bedside, cooking her favorite meals, reading to her when she was too weak to rise, whispering prayers each night that God would not take her away. But despite his love and devotion, her condition worsened, and the doctors spoke with quiet sympathy, warning that time was slipping through their fingers. And though Armaan fought against fate with everything he had, selling their home, selling his motorbike, even sleeping on hospital benches just to remain close to her, he could not change the cruel truth that her body was failing. One night, when her breaths grew shallow and her hands cold, she looked at him with fading eyes and whispered, "Why, Armaan, why did you give up everything for me? and with tears flooding his face he answered, "Because everything in this world is replaceable except you, and I would rather live in poverty with you than in riches without you." And she smiled, weak but filled with love, whispering, "Then promise me you will live, even when I am gone." And before he could respond, her hand slipped from his, and the room filled with the piercing sound of a flatline, the sound of a heart that loved too deeply, sacrificed too greatly, now silenced forever, and Armaan collapsed beside her, holding her lifeless body, screaming silently into the night, his soul torn apart. Armaan's life after Ayesha's death was like walking through an endless night, for the world had not only taken his wife but also stripped him of meaning, leaving him with nothing but silence where her laughter once lived, emptiness where her presence once warmed the air. And though people came with words of comfort, none could touch the cavern of loss that consumed him, for every corner of their small apartment carried her memory, every chair, every piece of fabric stitched with her hands, whispered of her sacrifices, and he would often sit in the dark clutching her scarf, inhaling the fading scent of her perfume, wishing he could turn back time. But time is merciless, and each day he awoke to the cruel truth that she would never again open the door, never again prepare his tea, never again fall asleep with her hand in his. For weeks he wandered in grief, forgetting to eat, forgetting to sleep, losing weight as he drowned in sorrow. But one morning, while sitting at the hospital chapel where he had last prayed for her life, he overheard the cries of a mother who had no money to buy medicine for her sick child, and in her despair he saw a reflection of what Ayesha had endured in silence, the endless sacrifices she made so he could live without burdens. And at that moment something stirred inside him, a flicker of purpose rising from the ashes of loss, and he whispered to himself, "If Ayesha gave everything for me, then I must give everything for others, so her love does not die with her." And with that vow he began a new journey, not as a man broken by grief but as a man fueled by love's eternal echo. Selling the last of his belongings, he rented a small broken building at the edge of the city, turning it into a makeshift clinic where poor families could seek help without fear of cost, naming it Ayesha's Hope. For he wanted every patient who walked through its doors to feel the same hope his wife had carried even while her body was failing. And though he was not a doctor, he worked tirelessly to find volunteers, medical students, retired nurses, anyone willing to lend a hand, and he begged hospitals for leftover supplies, medicines close to expiry, old beds no longer in use, piecing together a sanctuary from scraps, just as Ayesha had pieced together a life for them with needle and thread. At first, the clinic was empty, for people doubted it could offer anything, but slowly, mothers brought their children, men came with injured hands, elderly women came with weak hearts, and each time he gave them what little he had, remembering the nights Ayesha had coughed blood alone so he could eat, and it gave him strength to work without rest, to sacrifice sleep, to live not for himself but for the love she had left behind. Word spread in the neighborhoods that a man was helping without asking for money, a man whose eyes carried pain but whose heart carried mercy, and soon the small clinic overflowed with those who had nowhere else to go. And though Armaan was exhausted, he felt alive again, for each life saved was like honoring her, each smile returned to a child's face was like reliving her smile. Yet his own body grew frail, his hands shaking at times, his back bent from labor, and still he pressed on, whispering her name when fatigue threatened to break him, whispering, "For you, Ayesha, for you." Years passed and Ayesha's hope grew into more than a clinic. With the support of kind strangers, it became a proper hospital, standing tall where once only rubble had been. And in its lobby hung a picture of Ayesha, her eyes bright, her smile eternal, a silent reminder that love, even when struck by death, could give birth to something immortal. Children who once came sick and weak now grew up to volunteer at the hospital. Mothers prayed for Armaan like he was their own son, and the city began to speak of him as a man who gave without keeping, a man whose sacrifices built a home for the suffering. And yet when the lights dimmed and he sat alone in his office, he still missed her touch, her laughter, her presence, and though his heart carried wounds that never healed, he found comfort in knowing he had turned his grief into her legacy. One winter night, as snow drifted softly outside, Armaan sat by the hospital window, his body aged, his hair now gray, and he closed his eyes, whispering, "Ayesha, my love, I kept my promise, I lived when you asked me to, I built something in your name, but I am so tired now, so tired of walking alone." And as sleep embraced him, he dreamed of her once more, standing in their old apartment, wearing the same simple dress she had stitched years ago, her hands reaching out, her voice as gentle as the first day they met, saying, "You never walked alone, Armaan, I was always with you," and tears of joy fell down his cheeks even in the dream, for he knew his journey was ending, and when dawn came, the nurses found him at his desk, head bowed peacefully as if asleep, a faint smile on his face, and though his body was gone, his legacy remained carved into the walls of Ayesha's hope, where thousands continued to find healing, and where her photograph still looked down with timeless grace. And so their love story did not end in death but lived on in every life touched by sacrifice, reminding the world that true love is not measured by what we gain but by what we give, and that the deepest bond between husband and wife is not broken by distance, illness, or even death, but carried forward in the lives they change together. This is the story of Armaan and Ayesha, a husband who gave up his world for his wife, and a wife who gave up her health for her husband, two souls whose sacrifices became eternal proof that when love is true, it outlives everything, it becomes legacy, it becomes hope, and it becomes the kind of story that the world may forget in time, but heaven never will.